If you're a gardener, one of the problems you may have is trying to figure out how to get color and blooms and interest right through the season. Well, we've got a book for you today. It's called The Nonstop Garden, and it's written by Stephanie Cohen and Jennifer Benner. And we're actually very fortunate to have one of the authors, Stephanie Cohen, with us today. Thanks, Stephanie, for some time to tell us about this book, The Nonstop Garden. How do you get a garden that doesn't stop?
Well, you plant carefully. we wanted people to appreciate their garden from spring to fall, and then plant things for winter interest. The first book I wrote was on perennial gardening. It just basically was perennials. But now we've added shrubs, trees. If you feel like putting a pot in the garden, you know, a container, put it in there. What we're saying is, as long as they play nice together, that's fine. In other words, you have to, sun plants go as sun-shade plants, wet, dry. But if you're putting them with the same cultural requirements, there's no reason. Why does a beautiful herb have to sit in an herb garden where nobody sees it? Why can't it play with the big boys? So that was the whole idea of this thing, because most of the people, a lot of people today have very small gardens. They live in townhouses, or they have an acre. And then they look at books and they see these estates, they're like 20, 30 acres. And then they say, well, this is the cutting garden, and this is the herb garden, and that's the shrub border. Well, we can't do that over here. It's the garden.
We may not have the time to do that if we had the space, so can do a small space. And
you have to have the inclination or 3 gardeners.
Yeah.
And when you look at the cover there, you see that there's perennials, there's a tree in the background, several trees in fact, and then there's shrubs all mixed with the perennials. And that's what we're really aiming for. And for winter interest, we want you to pick things like that have interesting bark or interesting shapes, so that you're basically building into it structure for the winter. I don't use the term winter gardening, because winter gardening means to me sitting at my picture window, drinking a hot chocolate, looking out at the snow. Winter gardening means to me that I've planted it properly, and I'm looking out and I'm seeing color and form and texture from the bark, and there's things out there to look at. Of course, you need some conifers out there at that point of the year. So it's just sort of mixing and matching.
I think that's a good point, because so many people think, oh, this should be the perennials, these should be the annuals, and these should be the shrubs. Well, there's no reason you shouldn't mix them up, and also thinking about more than just, as we see on the cover, more than just the colored flowers, but the texture, the forms with upright and big leaves and spikiness, and you've got design examples in here, you've got plant examples, you've got just a lot, I think that's,
we
you know,
tried to cover
ideas.
the basis. There's trees, there's shrubs, there's annuals. There's a part of when we get to August, and that we call that the dog days. And if you don't have any, yes, there are some perennials and some shrubs that bloom in August, but not an overabundance. So that's when the annuals come in. And so if you don't plant them, you don't have that color when you want it. And so that's why I say you have to include everybody.
And that's a good point, because often that's the question I get. How do I get color into the summer? Everything's gone by, there we have it.
Because I tell people, you know, if you don't plant and then you look at your garden, you want to step on it because it's so terrible looking. And we don't want you to do that at all. We want you to appreciate it from spring through winter.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for spending some time sharing this book with us, and hope you'll look for it in either online or in your local bookstore. For University of Vermont Extension, I'm Leonard Perry.